Hello viewers, we have covered lot of ground in limit state design of RCC structures till this short video. In last few videos, we discussed about the action and effect pair. Now we are marching towards the design process of reinforced concrete members. So in limit state method, the design is principally done for two limit states, and one is called as limit state of collapse, limit state of collapse, and other one is called as limit state of serviceability. So what are these two limit states? Let us discuss these two limit states based on a real life example. Let us say few people are standing on a slab of a building and the slab does not collapse but it excessively deforms such that the occupants lose the feeling of safety. So we say that the limit state of serviceability has been reached. If you stand on the footover bridges connecting one platform to another platform of a railway station, if the railway passes below them, you can get the sense of vibration. If these vibrations are too heavy, then the occupants of that bridge lose the feeling of safety, and then we say that the structure has lost or breached limit state of serviceability. So limit state of serviceability has to do something with keeping the deformations of the system in check such that the functionality and feeling of safety of the structure is not compromised. Whereas limit state of collapse talks about reaching the strength of a particular member. Let us say if you increase the load on a beam beyond a particular value, then beam gets split into two parts or it collapses. Then we say that the beam has breached or reached the limit state of collapse. So I think in crude way, we have understood what is limit state of collapse and what is limit state of serviceability. Now, out of four actions that we discussed, those are axial force, shear force, bending moment, and twisting moment. Let us begin our attention on limit state of collapse, flexure. Flexure is synonym to bending. Now let us consider a simply supported beam. Subjected to central point load P. So this length is L by 2 and this length is L by 2. Can we draw its bending moment diagram? Yes. The concepts of strength of materials enable us to draw the bending moment diagram for such a member. This is a skeletal member or 1D member loaded transverse to its length, and therefore it is going to be subjected to bending moment of varying magnitude and nature at various locations on the beam. Due to symmetry, each of this reaction is going to be P by 2. And bending moment diagram is going to look like this. It is going to be triangular in nature, and this ordinate is going to be PL by 4. And everywhere it is going to be subjected to sagging bending moment. So as we discussed, as per our sign convention, this bending moment is going to be positive everywhere. Now what is the effect of this bending moment on various molecules of the cross section? So in strength of materials, we have learned the effect of bending moment on various molecules of the cross section. Let us say if I take cross section XX, then let us say it is rectangular one. This dimension is B and this dimension let us say is D. The effect of bending moment on this cross section will be seen by drawing bending stress distribution diagram. Bending stress distribution diagram. So there is going to be neutral axis where the stresses are going to be zero. Above the neutral axis, as it is sagging, we know that the beam is going to be subjected to compressive stresses. So I am writing it as sigma BC. Sigma stands for normal stresses on the cross section. These stresses act normal to the cross section. B stands for bending and C stands for compressive and max stands for extreme fibers of this cross section are going to experience maximum bending stress. Then this reduces to zero at neutral axis and on other side it becomes tensile in nature. So here the bending tensile stress is going to be maximum and that is going to be sigma BT max. So the effect of flexion is it puts the cross section partly in compression and partly in tension. The further you are from neutral axis, higher is the value of compressive or tensile stresses that fibers at that level experience. So these concepts are borrowed from the strength of materials. Now let us perform a thought experiment. If this beam is to be made up of concrete, then we know that concrete is very poor in tension, but it is very strong in compression. Therefore, concrete will not be able to resist tensile stresses to larger extent, and therefore this beam will carry very small amount of load P, and at that load PL by 4 maximum bending moment will reach to such an extent that beam will be collapsed into two parts. Now what can we do about it? As the concrete cannot resist tensile stresses, we will provide a reinforcement made up of steel. So these are 12 mm, 10 mm, 8 mm diameter bars made up of steel which are provided on the tension side of bending. So resisting tension is done by these steel bars which are provided along the length of the beam on tension side of bending. You can understand the tension is perpendicular to the cross section, so tension in this bar acts along this direction, this way. So tension acts along the longitudinal direction in the bar, and these bars cater for the weakness of concrete in resisting tension. Now let us perform a thought experiment and ask ourselves a question. Let us say we know how many bars are provided on the tension side of bending. The question that we are going to ask ourselves is, how does this member fail? Because unless we understand how does this member fail, we will not be able to design this member to carry a particular value of bending moment. So let us try and understand, let us try and answer this question. How does this reinforced concrete beam fails if we go on increasing the value of P? So for that, the very first assumption that we make is concrete does not carry any tensile stress. Concrete does not carry any tensile stress. Therefore, the entire tensile force that needs to be produced will be produced by steel, which is provided on tension side of the bending. Now what I am going to do is, let us consider two consecutive cross sections at the location where there is maximum bending moment. So this is the location which is susceptible to failure in flexion. So what I have done is, I have considered two consecutive cross sections which are seen as these lines in cross sectional view, sorry, in longitudinal view. These two cross sections are rectangular in nature, their dimensions are b into d. These two cross sections look this way here. Now, under the action of this P, the beam is going to bend in this manner. Therefore, these two consecutive cross sections, they are going to rotate in this fashion. So if you look at these two molecules on these two consecutive cross sections, the original distance between them has not been changed. But for all the molecules above this level, the distance between corresponding molecules of these two cross sections has been reduced in comparison with their natural distance, and therefore this entire zone will go in compression. Below the neutral axis, the reverse thing happens. That means the corresponding molecules of these two cross sections, they move away, their distance between them increases, and therefore therefore this zone will go in tension. Now, as you can understand, corresponding to the compression here, you are going to have one compressive resultant force which acts perpendicular to the cross section, and corresponding to tensile stresses here, there is one resultant tensile force which acts in this direction perpendicular to the cross section. These two forces must be equal because the beam is in equilibrium. So therefore this C must be equal to T, and they are parallel to each other and separated by distance equal to lever arm. So magnitude of one of the forces C into this lever arm is going to be equal to the external acting moment, that is PL by 4. So therefore, as PL by 4 increases, this compressive and tensile forces need to increase in their magnitude, making this compressive strengths and tensile strengths more and more as the load goes on increasing. Here we are going to make the second assumption: plane cross sections before bending remain plane after bending. Till failure. We will look at what is the consequence of these assumptions. So what we are essentially trying to say is, as the bending moment goes on increasing, these cross sections, they rotate in such a manner that plane cross sections before bending remain plane after bending. So what will be the consequence? So let us look at the consequence of this statement. So let us focus on these two consecutive cross sections. So under the action of bending moment, PL by 4, which is sagging in nature, these two cross sections rotate about these 2 points such that plane sections before bending remain plane after bending. So they rotate in this fashion. What do I mean by this is, this warping of the cross sections, this is called as warping of the cross sections, is not allowed. So when I say plane cross sections before bending remain plane after bending, I avoid this warping, and therefore I will see the deformed cross sections in this fashion. Mind you, these two cross sections we are looking in longitudinal view. If I look from this side, they are going to look like rectangles of size B cross B. Now let us have a look at what is the consequence of these plane sections remaining plane after bending? So let us say the original distance between these two cross sections was delta. So before this bending moment PL by 4 generated there, that means before the application of this P, these cross sections were originally in these positions, and corresponding molecules on these cross sections had distance delta between them. What is the consequence of bending moment PL by 4? These cross sections have rotated about these 2 points. Therefore, let me say that this distance after rotation is delta, and this distance after rotation is delta. And for sake of argument, let us say that these 2 points about which the rotation occurs is exactly at the mid depth. So this distance is d by 2. This is just for a sake of argument, and this distance is d by 2. So this distance is also delta, and this distance is also delta. Now, I am going to write down strain at various locations along the depth of this cross section. So let me write down strain at this location. I am going to call it as epsilon 1. So how do we write strain at epsilon 1? So it is change in distance divided by original distance. So all the molecules here had distance delta between them before deformation, but after deformation, the distance has been reduced by 2 delta. As it is reduced, it is compressive strain. So I write it as minus 2 delta is the change in distance upon original distance. So the value of strain epsilon 1 is minus 2 delta by delta. Similarly, the value of strain here, I am going to call it as epsilon 2. These two molecules earlier had distance delta between them, but after deformation, they have distance delta plus 2 small delta. Therefore, the strain epsilon 2 is 2 times small delta upon capital delta, change in distance upon original distance. But it is positive because it is tensile in nature. Now let us try and write down what is the value of strain at distance y from neutral axis. Before that, let me try and write down the value of strain at neutral axis itself. And I am going to call this strain here as epsilon 3. What is the value of epsilon 3? The molecules in this line had distance delta between them before deformation, and the distance remains delta after deformation. So therefore change in distance is 0, original distance is delta, therefore epsilon 3 is 0. So we know epsilon 3 is 0, we know epsilon 1 is some finite value. Epsilon 1 and epsilon 2 are same in magnitude but opposite in sense. Now I am considering a fiber or a molecule at distance y from neutral axis. So if I go distance d by 2, I get delta. So go distance d by 2, I get delta. Go distance y, what will I get? I will get y upon d by 2 into delta. So it is going to be T2y delta upon d. So this ordinate is 2y delta upon d. So what is the change in distance? I am now going to try and write value of strain epsilon y. So let me write down the value of strain epsilon y. That is normal strain at distance y from neutral axis on compressive side. So this is going to be epsilon y is going to be equal to change in distance. This and this distance is same. So total change in distance is 4y delta upon capital delta. Sorry, upon d. This divided by original distance between these two molecules was delta. So what is my observation? The moment I say plane sections before bending remain plane after bending, the strain at distance y from neutral axis varies as the first power of y. So the consequence of this assumption, plane sections before bending remain plane after bending, is that if I draw bending strain distribution diagram along the depth of the cross section, it is going to be linear. It is going to vary as the first power of y. So we understood what is the assumption. We understood what is its consequence. Assumption is plane sections before bending remain plane after bending. Warping is not allowed till failure. Consequence, bending strain distribution diagram remains straight line till failure. The very next question that we are going to ask ourselves is, what is the proof? So therefore, I must tell you here that for beams which follow Euler-Bernoulli theory, that means for the beams which have spans large in comparison with depths, so spans are very large in comparison with depths, then these beams are going to follow Euler-Bernoulli theory, beam bending theory, and for these cases, it has been experimentally observed that bending strain distribution diagram is fairly linear till failure, not only within linear elastic zone, till failure. And therefore, the assumption that plane cross sections before bending remain plane after bending till failure has been experimentally validated. So let us summarize. So what are the summary points? We are now looking at limit state of collapse flexion. Under flexion, the cross sections are partially going to take compressive stresses, and in partial cross section, in partial another part of cross section, tensile stresses are going to get induced. We assume that the concrete is totally ineffective in resisting tensile stresses. So the onus of resisting tensile stresses is only on the longitudinal steel that we provide on tension side of bending. Then we make the second assumption that plane sections before bending remain plane after bending till failure. And this assumption is respected as long as the beam behaves in Euler-Bernoulli bending pattern. That means as long as the length of the beam is very large in comparison with depth of the beam. Typically, length by D ratio, if it is greater than 6, then we have guarantee that Euler-Bernoulli beam theory is going to be valid, and plane cross sections before bending will remain plane after bending till failure. The consequence of this assumption is that bending strain distribution diagram is going to be linear till failure. These were the summary points of today's lecture, and now we are going to see in next lecture what are the three different modes of failure of a reinforced concrete beam subjected to flexion. Thank you.